And please welcome the next speaker, Luong Thuc.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me begin my talk today with a question. What will you do when the thing you were best at, the thing that once defined you, stops working? I mean, when you do everything right, you follow the rules, you push yourself as far as you can, but the result still says no. When we talk about fire, it is always framed as energy, as momentum, as something that guarantees movement forward. But we almost never talk about when the fire stops being that impressive, when the fire stops showing up in places that are easy to celebrate, and all we have left are the ashes and the ruins. Then does it still count as fire? For most people, the answer is no. And what I mean by using the word fire here is the definition of success we build our sense of identity around. So for such a long time, fire in my life was very easy to measure as it took the shape of academic excellence, something that is visible and constantly reinforced through grades, rankings, awards, and certificates. And as long as those numbers kept rising, the fire felt so reliable. I grew up being labeled an outstanding student. Throughout secondary school, I earned multiple academic awards, maintained one of the highest GPAs, and graduated with the Comprehensive Excellence Award. Later, I became the top scorer in the entrance exam to Le Thanh Tom High School for the gifted in the subject of English. Praise and expectation followed naturally, and little by little, those expectations stopped being external. It stopped sounding like praise and started sounding like responsibility. And I was convinced that effort and outcome would always move in the same direction, that if I worked hard enough, the future would have no choice but to follow, until it turns out that the future has a lot more freedom than I expected. The turning point came in grade 10. The first major exam was the selection test for the National Excellent Student Competition. This was the next step everyone a student like me would reach when I entered high school, as the continuation of a story that had always moved upward. And I did exactly what people expected from me. I studied relentlessly, I lived inside exam papers, I took meticulous notes, and I pushed myself through every single mock test I could find on the internet. And when the result came, they told a completely different story. I received a consolation prize. I did not make the top 10, which meant I was not selected. So apparently, persistence and the judging panel was not on the same team. And for the very first time, effort stopped translating into the future I had imagined. So I tried again in grade 11, this time more disciplined, more experienced, and more desperate, if I'm being honest. And at one point, I even set the phrase, "hard work pays off," on the wallpaper of my phone, just to remind myself that effort was supposed to guarantee something. A second attempt and a third prize this time, so technically better, but obviously still not good enough. And once again, the word "not selected" shattered the trust in myself and the hope others had placed on me. What followed was not any heroic reinvention, but rather it was a redirection. I didn't wake up one day feeling so inspired or motivated again. I was just looking for somewhere to place the parts of me that no longer fit inside academic success. So I took the courage to step into unfamiliar spaces like media, communication, academic projects, and leadership roles. From the outside, it looks like I had everything figured out, but on the inside, I absolutely didn't. I was just looking for somewhere to place the parts that no longer go with academic excellence. Over time, through months of engaging in extracurricular activities, I became the vice president for the school foreign language club, the head of content for the school media club, the head of communications for a youth model united project. But I was convinced that what I had lost is irreversible. I believe my passion for English, my first and strongest passion, had burned out for good. And if my younger self had seen who I was at 16, she must have been deeply disappointed. But only later did I realize that the fire had never completely burned out. It was there when I analyzed business cases, when I read hundreds of pages of academic research in English for my first science project, when I debated in competitions, when I developed communication concepts for the initiatives I worked on. And when the time came to apply for university, I began to see those experiences differently. The things I once thought were distractions, like leading media teams, working with people, helping run a club, turned out to be the things that shaped my path. And somehow, that story brought me all the way to one thing I had only imagined from afar: being accepted into the international program in communication science at the University of Amsterdam, one of the globally respected universities for its reputation in media training, where the program itself is ranked among the very top in the world. So obviously, the fire didn't disappear, right? It had to stop burning in the place where I myself and everyone else was watching back then. And this is where the Phoenix principle becomes so meaningful. For those of you who may not know the story, let me briefly tell you about the phoenix. In ancient myths, the phoenix is a type of bird that lives for hundreds of years. When it reaches the end of its life, it builds a nest out of dry branches, sets it on fire, and allows itself to be consumed by the flames. Everything that once defined the phoenix, its wings, its feathers, its strength, turns into complete ashes. And only after the fire had completely burned out, a new phoenix emerges, more powerful than ever. People love the image of the phoenix rising in the flames, which looks so impressive. But before anything rises, there's a long phase that feels so gloomy. Just like the phoenix suffering in the fire, it willingly enters, knowing that survival is not promised, but only transformation is. There's that awkward period where nothing is truly moving forward, but nothing is clearly over either. So when my fire stopped winning, I kept doing things without any clear reasons. And for a while, that felt just like failure continuing, just with a slightly different outfit. When I no longer set my heart on academic competition, when good grades stopped being the center of my identity, people started to say things like, "She has fallen off, right?" Or, "Does she really deserve the title top scorer of a specialized high school?" And maybe they were right by their standards and in their own terms of success. But I think at some point we have no choice but to step out of the norm, to take some path that might appear to be very irrational or even crazy to others. And if you ever ask me, I would choose differently, my answer is no. I would still go for this redirection again, choosing not to follow the norm of what a model student is supposed to do. Because through this, I learned lessons no classroom could offer. I learned soft skills I never knew I needed. I met so many people who are not only talented, but genuinely inspiring. I become more curious to learn, to question, to move forward more than I had ever been before. Just like one of my teachers has told us on the very first day of high school, almost like 3 years ago. You guys used to be the best, the top students, wherever you came from. Now that you all gathered at this school, there will be time when you feel overshadowed. But remember, you must always be number one, the number one of your own. That number one might be big or small, complete or incomplete, but it has to be yours. And looking back now, I think I did make it to be my own number one, just in a very different way from what I once imagined. And somewhere along that confusing period, I started to understand something and now think of as the Phoenix principle. When things fall apart, the first thing you need to do is face it plainly, because rebuilding starts from the truth of what actually happens. Then pay attention to what's still present, because in my case, nothing actually needed replacing. The same interest was still there, it was unfolding in different parts of life. From the outside, that period was just like a series of unreliable decisions, like working with people, helping run a club, taking on responsibilities I hadn't tried before. But somehow, that story shaped the person standing here today. And it's kind of strange when there was a time I could hardly bring myself to tell these stories to even a small group of people, because I think it's embarrassing to tell about my failure. But somehow, it's also me standing here telling the same story with so much pride. And I want to end my very first TED Talk with a question. When the type of success you were chasing no longer stays alive, what are you still willing to show up for, knowing it may never bring back the recognition or applause from others? If you already have an answer, then congratulations. But if you don't, that's all right, because I'm still on my way to figure it out. Are you willing to come along? Thank you.